Well, many of you know that I was a lawyer before I became a pastor. And for my first 2 years of seminary, before I had my first United Methodist appointment, I continued to work part-time as a lawyer. But I knew that once I had my first appointment, my days as a lawyer were going to come to an end. And once in a while during those 2 years, I wondered how I was going to feel when I walked out the door of that law office for the last time. Now, don't get me wrong, I was confident that going into ministry was the right thing for us to do. But still, I had worked in that law office for about 17 years. It was a big part of my life. How was it going to feel to actually leave it? What was I going to feel? Would I feel sadness? Would I feel regret? Would I feel nostalgia? How was it going to feel when I walked out and closed that office door for the last time? Well, as it turned out, I really did not feel any of those things. What I felt really was a sense of appropriateness. It just felt right to be leaving the law office. Not that I hated my time there or anything. I don't mean that. I had this sense that things were going the way they were supposed to go. I'd enjoyed my time in law, but I had done everything I was supposed to do there. And now it was time. It was time to walk through that door and find out what was going to happen next. And when I thought about it later, it occurred to me that it would be really cool if death feels like that. If in fact that we're blessed enough to live a long and full life, it would be really nice to have that sort of feeling at the end of it, to have no sadness, no regrets, no nostalgia, to feel that death at that time was simply an appropriate thing, to have it feel right be leaving this life. Not that we've hated our time here, but just to have that sense that things were going the way they were supposed to go, that we had done everything that we were supposed to do here, and that now it was time to walk through that door and find out what happens next. Now, I don't know if that's how it actually will feel, but I don't think we possibly can know how it's going to feel until it happens to us. Something we actually have to experience. But I have hopes that it will feel that way, and one of the reasons for my hope is the description of Jesus' death on earth from our reading in the Gospel of John. Jesus is led out to the place of his crucifixion. Now, Jesus had known for some time this was going to happen. He told the disciples many times that he was going to be killed. He told them how he was going to be killed. None of this came as any surprise to Jesus. It was what he had been sent to earth to do. So Jesus is on the cross. His work on earth is done. And in looking into this, to help me picture it, I discovered that the way that we sometimes picture Jesus' crucifixion is probably wrong. We tend to picture him as being way up high on the cross, several feet off the ground. What I read is that's probably not the way it worked. When you were crucified, you were not very far off the ground, maybe a foot at most. Nobody would have had to lean way back or crane their necks way up to look at Jesus. Jesus and the other people who were crucified were not towering way above everybody. They were just a little bit above everybody. Not really all that far from eye level when you think about it. But Jesus is on the cross. His work on earth is done. Except for one thing. He's hanging on the cross, and Jesus sees one more thing that he can do. He sees his mother Mary standing there near him. And next to Mary is someone who is described as the disciple whom Jesus loved. We assume that that's the disciple John. Jesus says to Mary, "Woman, here is your son." He says to John, "Here is your mother." Jesus, hanging on the cross, is able to do one last thing out of love. He's able to make sure that his earthly mother, Mary, has someone to take care of her now that he's going to be gone. And after that, we're told that Jesus knew that everything has now been finished. He asks for a drink, he gets one. He says the words, "It is finished." And he dies. And it sounds to me like Jesus had that feeling that I talked about earlier. That at the end of his life on earth, Jesus had no sadness, he had no regrets, he had no nostalgia. He knew that his death at that time was simply appropriate, that it was right for him to be leaving his life on earth. He had the sense that things were going the way they were supposed to go. The scriptures had been fulfilled. Jesus had done everything he was supposed to do here. And now it was time. It was time to walk through that door and find out what would happen next. Now, of course, the difference between Jesus and you and me is that Jesus knew what would happen next. Jesus knew that he would rise from the dead, that he would spend a little more time with the disciples on earth, and then he would go back to heaven. Because Jesus had been in heaven before he came to earth. He knew what heaven was like. He knew that he would be going back to be with God the Father. In effect, Jesus knew that when he left earth, he would be going home. Now that's a phrase that we use sometimes too, going home. We talk about dying as going home, going as God calling us home sometimes. And there's truth in that, of course. Earth may be our home for now, but we know that our time here on earth is only temporary. We know that if we believe in Jesus as our Savior, we will go to our future home, to our permanent home, to our eternal home. And we too will go to be with God the Father in heaven. But while we believe that, and we may even say that we know it, you and I have never been to heaven. We don't know what it's like there. We really cannot picture it. The Bible tells us a few things, the streets being paved with gold and so forth. But we really don't know if even that is something we're supposed to take literally or not. The fact is that you and I don't really know what heaven is like. And we don't know what it'll be like there. We don't know what we'll be like there. For us, even if we believe in heaven, what happens next is still a mystery. But you know, I wonder if there's an extent to which it was even a mystery for Jesus while he was on earth. Now don't take that the wrong way. I meant what I said earlier, that Jesus had been in heaven before he came to earth, and that he knew when he left the earth he would be going back to heaven. But what I wonder is, while Jesus was on earth, was he able to remember everything about what heaven really is? Because, you know, this is one of the many things that we don't understand about the fully divine and yet fully human Jesus. While Jesus was on earth, he was not connected to God the Father in the same way that he had been in heaven. That's why he would often go off by himself to meditate and to pray. He was trying to get back that connection to God the Father, that close connection that he had when he was in heaven. Now, Jesus knew who he was. He knew he was the divine Son of God, and he knew what that meant. He knew that he had come from heaven and that he would return to heaven. Jesus knew all that. But what I'm wondering is how well he was able to call to mind what heaven really was while he was on earth. We think that Jesus was about 33 years old when he was crucified, and that means it had been 33 years since he had been to heaven. Now, 33 years is a blink of an eye in heavenly terms, but it's a long time in earthly terms. 33 years ago, it was 1984. Ronald Reagan was the president. The big pop song was Tina Turner singing What's Love Got to Do with It? The big movie of 1984 was the original Police Academy movie. 33 years ago, I was 25 years old. Just starting my career as a lawyer. No thought I'd ever become a pastor. Hadn't even met Wanda yet 33 years ago. Point is that in human terms, 33 years is a long time. And again, Jesus was fully human as well as fully divine. Could the fully human Jesus really remember what heaven was? Could he remember what it looked like? Could he remember what it smelled like? Could he remember how it felt to be there? Or was heaven somewhat of a mystery to Jesus, just like it is to us? Maybe not, we don't really know. But maybe Jesus did not need to know all of those things. Maybe Jesus did not need to know exactly what was waiting for him in heaven, because he knew who was waiting for him in heaven. Jesus knew that when he returned to heaven, he would be reunited with God the Father. And maybe that was all that Jesus really needed to know. And maybe that's all that you and I need to know too. Sure, it would be nice if we could picture heaven. It would be nice if we could really know what it looks like, what it smells like, all that. It would be nice if we really knew how it feels to be there. But maybe you and I really don't need to know that. We don't need to know what's waiting for us in heaven, because you and I too know who is waiting for us in heaven. We know that in heaven we will be in the presence of the almighty and all-powerful, and yet all-loving and all-caring God. Maybe that's all we really need to know too. We all know that for each one of us, the day will come when it's time for us to walk through that door and find out what's next. Whenever that day comes, may we meet it with no sadness, with no regret, with no nostalgia. May we have that feeling that everything that is happening is simply appropriate. That things are going the way they're supposed to go. That we've done everything we're supposed to do. And may we walk through that door ready to find out what happens next. And may we be confident that that door is going to lead us to the almighty, all-powerful, all-loving, and all-caring God. Amen.